Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud. Today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the first decan of Virgo. I hope that you're having a wonderful afternoon out there. We're going to be diving into all of the significations associated with Virgo I. We're going to be breaking down the chart. We're going to be talking about the host Mercury. We're going to be taking you through all of some of the aspects as it unfolds in the week or two ahead of that new moon. We're going to be talking about the fixed star Regulus a little bit today. And then we're going to do an I-Ching to help guide us through the lunation. And then we're going to have an animal spirit that's going to guide us as well. If you're joining us here today, don't be shy. Drop me a comment here in the chat. I would love to hear from you. Tell me where you're stopping in from. Tell me how things are going in your world, and we will keep the good conversation flowing. Javiera is here. Hello, Javiera says hello. Hope everyone's doing well today. Saying hey from Ontario, Canada. Nice to see you, Javiera. Hope everything's going well your way, my friend. Rachel Fletcher is here from Roanoke, Virginia. Nice to see you, Rachel. Hope you're doing well and everything's going well with you and your parrot friend Loki. So, couple announcements before we dive in, friends. We have some new services here. Well, I don't know if they're new, but they are their services, I guess you could say. Go check me out over at spencermichaud.com. This is a great place to sign up for a reading. If you want to sign up for classes, if you want to reach out to see how your fall is going to unfold. I know this time of year as we start moving into Virgo season is a great time to kind of check in with your local astrologer and make a plan. This is a great time to make a plan and to see how to take all that abundance that you've been growing over the summertime and preserve it for the winter months ahead. So I hope that you'll reach out at spencermichaud.com on the Book Now tab over there to reach out for a reading. I would love to work with you. I also do teaching over there if you're interested in learning more about astrology, the tarot, fixed stars, etc. Let's work together. I'm also having a sale on all of my digital recordings. We just finished up our Dignity and Devotion webinar series with my beautiful partner Tanya Andrews. We did Saturn this past weekend. It was fun. It was awesome. It was quite a journey. We've been going through this for an entire year. Those are for sale for 20% off at the store button at spencermichaud.com. Use the code SAGMOONMAGIC to save. I've also got all of my Decan webinars there. I'm going to be talking about the Decans of Virgo here today. You can purchase that webinar. Also have some teachings about the connection with astrology and tarot. Go check that out, spencermichaud.com. It's a great way to support the channel while also learning about astrology. Speaking of my partner, Tanya Andrews, she has a beautiful Etsy account called Third Coast Mojo where she's crafting all these wonderful, beautiful oils and soaps, bath salts, etc. that are magically elected using planetary magic. Here you see Iron Teeth, which is a exalted Mars and Capricorn election. A great way to help mitigate some of the challenges potentially of Mars and Libra. I hope that you'll take advantage of that. She's got some great stuff. She does some amazing, amazing work. We're going to talk about the part of spirit a little bit today. She has the part of spirit in Virgo too, friends. The spirit in Decan that's associated with excellent craftsmanship. So know that all of the detail work and all of the hard work behind the scenes that are going into these beautiful creations, she is on top of it. So I hope that you'll support her over there as well. I also have a newsletter that I would love for you to sign up for. You can click on the description of this video to sign up for the newsletter or sign up on my website, spencermichaud.com. And when you do, you'll get a 10% discount off of every service that I offer. You can also keep up to date when all of the things are going live, when we're going to do these live streams on YouTube, when I'm going to be offering new classes. There's new offerings that are coming in the fall, so I hope that you'll stay up to date with all of that. And then finally, if you want to support the channel, which is super important because it is a virtue of mine to keep this channel as open as possible for all of you to be able to learn astrology, to be able to get updates on your life moving forward, to prepare you for what is coming, and to maybe sort of create some balance and harmony and peace within your life. And to be able to do that, your support is needed and much appreciated. So if any of you are feeling generous today, there is a little $ in the chat called a super chat on YouTube, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com. That can help me to keep going. It can help me to purchase all of the software that I use to create this live stream each week, and the equipment and the books, etc. There's other things that you can do as we try to practice the reciprocity of a gift economy: liking and subscribing to the channel and to the video itself, liking the video, sharing it with your friends, sharing it on your social media platforms, commenting, whether it's during the live stream or afterwards. All of these things can contribute to helping us to increase our visibility and to keep us doing this wonderful work. So those are the announcements that I have for you today. Let's check in with the chat and see some new friends stopping in here. Let's see. Ooh, we've got some nice comments. I love this. Let's see what we've got here. We've got Ana Estrella is here. It says, hello, friends from Ecuador. I found this beautiful channel through your daughter's TikTok. It's so happy about it. Oh, welcome, Ana. And hope everything's going well for you down in Ecuador. And I'm so excited that we've got all these new friends coming from Sag Moon Magic TikTok, my daughter's TikTok channel. So thank you and welcome. And don't be shy. Like, let's hear what's going on in your life. If you have observations about the planets or questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Javiera says, it's going all right. I'm glad to hear that, Javiera. Sometimes that's the best that we can ask for, right? Sometimes just going all right is much better than going wrong. Oh, let's see. Ooh, we got everybody checking in. I love the conversations. Karen Clark is here. What's up, Karen? Says, good morning, Spencer. Nice to see you, Karen. Hope everything's going well your way. SF Hansen is here. Hello, Mr. Hansen. Stopping in from Denmark. That's pretty cool. I love our European friends as well. So welcome, my friend, and hope things are going well your way. Jody is here. My good friend Jody says, hi, Spencer. Can't chat, but listening in. Oh, I'm glad to see you, Jody. Hope everything's going well your way, my friend, down there in sunny Florida, and that you're taking care of those puppies. Jody is an excellent, she's an excellent groomer, dog groomer. So she has a big heart for animals, and I have a big heart for animals. So thank you, Jody, for doing all that great work. Angela is here saying hello from Paris. Nice to see you, Angela. Hope everything's going well your way and that you're having a beautiful experience in one of the cities of love, right? Javier says, Third Coast Mojo looks so yummy. It is good stuff, Javier. She puts a lot of work into that that website, into the oils, the soaps, etc. Attention to detail is one of her strengths. She's really great at creating just not only very powerful, magically elected materia, but making it beautiful, making it something that you really just enjoy having in your space and enjoy using. So really excited to continue to promote her amazing work. Ani is here, says, hey, how is Mercury's malefic enclosure treating everyone? I already had several astrologer good stories from yesterday and today. Yeah, good point, Ani. We are just entered into, as of last night, the malefic enclosure of Mercury, which is a challenging experience from having a sextile from Mars and a trine from Saturn, although it's mitigated by those benefic aspects. But those two planets are closing in Mercury and, kind of giving us maybe a little bit of feelings of being a little stuck, maybe a little bit of anxiety about a certain issue. The good news is that it's a temporary aspect. It's only going to last until Monday. Sometimes we just have to wait for those aspects to kind of pass. And I think that understanding that mercurial significations may be a little bit stagnated over the weekend, or feelings of being a little bit like enclosed, that can help us not to push too hard against those issues. And when we stop pushing against things, that's when we can regain our balance and our equilibrium. So really important even to know some of the challenging aspects so that we don't keep banging our head against those walls. Yeah, I hope everyone's having a lovely day as well, Javier. Thomas Hines is here. Says, namaste, Spencer and everyone. Nice to see you, Tom. Hope everything's going well your way out in sunny San Francisco. All right, my friends. So let's start checking in here. One more comment from Ani says, I testify, those Third Coast oils, you'll smell great and it will enhance your ritual. Amen to that. Amen to that. I'm wearing all sorts of it today. So I got a lot of her Mercury in Virgo oil on right now to help maybe mitigate some of the challenges with this Mercury in malefic enclosure. All right. Let me turn down the AC a little bit. It's beeping at us. Okay, friends. So today we're talking about the new moon in Virgo. And this is going to be happening around the 23rd of August. I can bring this up on the screen to show you what we're dealing with here. So here is our chart, and I'll make it big for a second, and then we'll kind of work through it. So you can see here, this is the new moon, August 23rd, 2025, 2:06 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Make the appropriate adjustments for your location. So this is Saturday, right? This is coming up a week from tomorrow. So we're trying to get out ahead of it so we can prepare and get our minds in the right spaces, and get ready for this new moon in Virgo, which is, I think, a really powerful one. It is one that I would say is squared Uranus. Okay, so we have a south node new moon, which is squared Uranus, and we are kind of probably going to be trying to break down some of our old patterns, some of our old challenges, our old forms. It is conjoining the south node in a wide orb, but it is co-present with the south node, which is a place of decrease. So we may be decreasing things like anxiety. We might be decreasing attachment to a system that we had that might not be working for us anymore. The square with Uranus is trying to teach us to shake things up a little bit, to maybe break free of some of our ruts and patterns, some of our methods that may not be appropriate for the current time period. It may have been appropriate at one point in the past, but I think now we might be experiencing something where we are kind of needing to move on, needing to grow, right? And I think this is one of the opportunities to do so. It's going to be hosted by Mercury at 12 degrees of Leo. It is an inversion. That is a place where it's a little bit challenging, where it is a little bit hidden, I guess you could say. Some of these things might be happening behind the scenes. Some of these things may be happening in a little bit of a disconnect from visibility. We've been going through a lot of questioning of who we are and how we show up for the world with Mercury going through its retrograde cycle in Leo. This is also going to help us to understand what our authentic self is. I think this new moon is an opportunity to start finding new information, new methodology to be able to express our most authentic self. It may be a little bit awkward at first because there is no direct connection between Mercury and the new moon. So this may be work that we have to do behind the scenes. This may be work that we have to do to gather information, to assess our strengths and to assess our weaknesses. This is one of the things that Virgo is very, very good at, identifying flaws in any system that isn't allowing us to move forward in a productive way. So that is one of the cliches about Virgo, identifying flaws. The other part of it that's super important to understand is that we can also identify values. We can also identify strengths. What are we good at? What are the things that are working in our lives? This is where we find the balance between things. I've been going on a deep dive into balance recently. I've been doing a lot of meditation and research on the part of spirit, for those of you who are familiar with that traditional astrological point. It represents a point in the chart that is calculated by the distance between the sun and the moon and then cast out from the ascendant, if you want to get technical. But the part of spirit, just from a practical standpoint, oftentimes can show us something that is motivating us, a daimon or a spirit even, like a daimon of the decan that we're experiencing. I've been doing research on this, and my part of spirit is in Libra 3. And the daimon and spirit in that decan is Nemesis, that goddess that increases that which is lacking and increases that which is lacking and decreasing that which is excessive. It also is helping to restore right proportion, but through our own calmness, through our own sense of balance and equilibrium. Rather than seeking it externally, it starts internally. And I'm finding a lot of truth within that. And I think that if we apply that balance to our Virgo new moon, we may be feeling some anxiousness about the coming changes in our routines. A lot of the times we can see a change of circumstance, a change from one season to the next. The new moon in Virgo is sort of initiating the end of summer, the preparation phase for a lot of us that are either going back to school or have children that are going back to school. Maybe we are going into a new phase ourselves where our routines will have to change, and we're preparing for the winter. We're preparing for the shift from the light part of the year, signified by the peak of summer solstice, and we're working towards the autumnal equinox, where the darkness starts to take power, right? It starts to increase in its power, where we're starting to go and recede from visibility, where we're starting to learn how to conserve our energy. And Virgo season is a point of evaluation where we say, what did we do well in this year? How do we pass that on and preserve it as a legacy? And then how do we discard the things that are falling into decay, that show signs of decay? And there's a little bit of anxiety around that because we feel time pressure with it. And the time pressure, for any of you who have been gardeners, farmers, etc., you have a limited window when you've grown crops like tomatoes, etc., to be able to can them for the winter before they go bad. And that's the time pressure that we feel, that is a natural time pressure. It's going to be exacerbated a little bit by the square with Uranus. That square with Uranus is probably going to be leading towards a little bit of feeling like, oh, I've got to expand when the season is about contraction. So that is a difficult harmonization point that we will talk about further in depth. I'm going to check in with my chat here. Javier says, I'm very curious of this new moon. I have the moon in Virgo. So this is going to be activating for you, Javier, activating a new, kind of a cycle for you, and probably activating some of the things that you will very much recognize in your natal patterns and cycles. Ani says, because there is an aversion between Mercury and the Sun, it's not technically mutual reception due to no aspect, but isn't there a benefit of being in each other's houses even if they can't see each other? Yes, and that's a good point. So I do think that there is a mutual reception between the Sun and Mercury exchanging houses. So that's a good catch, Ani. The mutual reception is a concept where we are seeing one planet in the temple or the house or the land of another sign or another planet, excuse me. So in this case, Mercury is going to be in the house of the Sun, and the Sun is in the house of Mercury. So they sort of have a secret means of connection. Again, this is why a lot of the things that we're going to be doing at this new moon might potentially be behind the scenes, not necessarily as visible as they might be in other new moons. Ani says, I've learned being in each other's signs with no aspect is called mutual generosity and still has some benefit, but I'm working this out in practice. Yeah, exactly. I think you're totally right on with this, Ani. So again, the way that I've experienced that type of mutual generosity, as you put it, is that there is these exchange of resources, but it is not necessarily something that we can see out in the forefront. It may be something that's behind the scenes. It may be an internal experience rather than an external one. And oftentimes we have ideas and thoughts that we don't necessarily know or have to do anything with right away, and that might be part of this as well. All right, so let's keep breaking this down. I might have to turn this AC back on. I don't know why it was doing. Sorry for the... It's beeping. I tried to turn all the sounds off with it, but it's getting hot in here. It still is summer, right? Well, at least in my area. For those of you who are joining us from the southern hemisphere, I hope you're keeping warm. Okay, so let's talk about the Sun and Moon in Virgo 1, and then we'll break down some of the other elements of this. So I'm going to bring to the stage here, this is a Decanic flashcard, if you will. I've been experimenting with some ways to see things more visibly. Instead of putting a slide from my Decans of Virgo webinar up on the screen, which is very hard to read, I'll just put the Decan flashcard, and then we'll talk about that and break it down. So Virgo 1, what does Virgo 1 represent? What are we working through in Virgo 1? Well, you could see here in the Eight of Pentacles, we have a craftsman who is working very hard on his pentacles at his workbench. He's not necessarily adorned with like fancy clothes. He's got like the workman's smock, I guess you could say. He's an apprentice. They talk about him being an apprentice of an advanced age. So this might be a time period where you have to learn a new skill, and it takes humility to admit that we need to learn a new skill. Sometimes we feel like we have to put on a mask of competence. We have to, quote unquote, fake it till we make it. A lot of that is pressure from a society that tells us that we have to be experts or we're not of value. But that's not necessarily the case. The way that you become an expert is through a lot of hard work and through a lot of humility and asking questions and saying, you know what, I'm still in process. So apprenticeship, focus, learning the laws of incarnation. This decan has a spirit associated with it called Themis. And Themis was sort of a goddess. First of all, she was a voice of the oracle, which is interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. But she was someone who transmitted laws of incarnation, understanding what it takes to take a divine idea or ideal and put it and enclose it and encase it into matter. Now, I've talked a lot about this on this channel, is that the ability to think of an idea can be instantaneous, but the manifestation of that on the physical world is subject to the laws of time and space, resources, and the limitations associated with all of that. So how do we learn the types of skills to be able to work within the limitations that we have on this material plane? So learning to work with the materials that we want to pass on as a legacy. So learning laws, learning new skills, awareness of skills or a lack of thereof with those skills, because this face ruler, this decanic ruler, is the sun. So we're shining a big spotlight on our skill set. And that can be painful. That can lead to some self-recrimination when we become aware that we lack a skill that we need to bring an idea into fruition and reality. Our first reaction can be a wince, like, ooh, I don't quite have the skills to do that. If we take that feeling and then we start applying ourselves, then we can make something of that. I know for me as a professional musician in the past, when I would go and watch other musicians, having a Virgo stellium, having Jupiter in this decan, it was very difficult for me in those past years to enjoy a music concert in the way that many people enjoy a music concert, because my initial reaction was, even if the person was, especially if the person was really good, I'd be like, I got to go home and practice. I can't do that. I need to go home and I need to learn how to do that because I was inspired by that. That's the instant type of energy of Virgo I. It says, ugh, I'm inspired by that, but man, I'm feeling like I lack that. So I need to go to the workshop, right? The woodshed, I guess you could say, as a musician practicing. So when we have an awareness of those lack of skills, there is an immediate solution to it. It's getting to work. It's getting in your books. It's getting into your workshop. It's practicing. It's trying to make things, even if they're not perfect. That's the other thing about Virgo that can be difficult, is that pursuit of perfectionism that is impossible to achieve on the physical plane. We can always imagine something more perfect in the spiritual realm and in the idealistic and in the thought realm than we can actually make it on the physical plane of existence. Now, there's also ways of thinking about perfectionism, especially related to the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, where they leave the last 10% of an artistic creation to nature to complete. The imperfection is what makes it beautiful. So if we start to see that the imperfections are actually what is creating the beauty of its incarnation, that can help release us from some of the self-recrimination that we often feel with Virgo placements. This decan is about questioning, skepticism. Sometimes we have to ask really intense questions if we want to find answers to things. The Book of Tea and Book of Thoth calls this the Lord of Prudence. You know, this is where we start to make the work more important than the ego, where we start to take that Leonine energy where we say, who are we really, right? We've had this hard-fought authenticity that we've hopefully manifested a bridge between our inner truth and our external experience. And now we say, well, what do we do with this? How do we serve with this authenticity, right? The virtue of prudence. How do we understand limitations? How do we understand rules, boundaries? How do we take that solar light and do something practical with it? So questions to reflect with Virgo I. What is possible? What is realistic? What isn't? We have to know what isn't realistic so that we can achieve what we can. This is something that my partner Tanya and I have really been working through. Me with Jupiter in this decan, her with Saturn in this decan. We've been trying to understand our limitations. We both get very ambitious about trying to bring something into being. And with the South Node in Virgo, we're having to learn that sometimes less is more. I've been very, very inspired, I guess, by this book. It's called Margin. I don't know if you can see this. It's called Margin by Richard Swenson. Okay, here's Margin. There you go. And it's Margin, restoring emotional, physical, financial, and time reserves to our overloaded lives. And really, the gist of this is how do we create space in our lives through eliminating that which is just overloading us. I will just give you the caveat, and I think it's an important caveat. This particular author is his spiritual practice is in the Christian tradition. So if that's something that doesn't work for you, there might be some triggering language within that. But I am choosing, even though I'm not a practicing Christian myself, I appreciate some of the virtues within some parts of Christianity if it's used in service rather than used to control. But I'm choosing to see the essence of his message versus the container. So I think that one of the things that we can do is we create space in our life through balance. We create space in our lives through making the adjustments, the small detailed adjustments that we need to make. If we're working too hard at our job, our relationships might be suffering. If we're working too hard at something creative, we may forget to sleep or forget to eat. If we're too concerned with making money, we might not have a sense of purpose or meaning behind that. There are all sorts of things that we can start making these adjustments. None of them are inherently wrong. It's just that they become unhealthy when we pursue. He talks about pursuing the pursuit of excellence at the expense of all of these other things. And the pursuit of excellence in one category can lead to negative excellence, like a lack or a failure in some other area of our life. And I'm telling you, I'm here to tell you, friends, I have experienced that pursuit of excellence and the negative excellence that can come in other areas of life when pursuing that. As a young person, I very much had an extremely high standard for what I was doing, and I still do in certain areas of my life. But what I'm realizing is that sacrificing any part of my health, any part of my relationships, any part of my sanity for the pursuit of this perfectionism can lead to not being able to do anything well, right? It can lead to such an imbalance that we can't do the original work that we were attempting to do. I saw a movie this weekend. The movie it's called It's Never Over, and it was a documentary about Jeff Buckley. And one of the things that really stood out to me with Jeff Buckley, who also has the part of spirit in Libra 3, right? He needed balance in his life, as he had that pursuit of excellence at any cost type of thing. And some of that was born out of trauma. The trauma of being abandoned by a father when he was younger, the trauma of feeling maybe unloved at some point in his life, that he felt like he had to work hard to be loved, to be accepted, to earn his love. And I feel like this is often the case that drives us to pursue excellence and perfection at the cost of other parts of our life. And the antidote to that, first of all, is accepting our being, not what we can do, but what we can just be. Accepting us in this moment, right now, accepting yourself as you are. The other thing I like about this Margin book is talking about the idea of contentment. A huge concept that is antithetical to our current society of saying you need to be more, you need to earn more, you need to do more. Our advertising industry is nefarious for implanting insecurity and artificially manufacturing need. It is not manufacturing contentment. They are offering contentment through selling you something. But to offer you contentment through the sale requires tearing down that self-esteem, tearing down that contentment. And I think this is the great antidote to this new moon in Virgo, is oftentimes Virgo placements can make us feel very unsatisfied. And how do we create the balance, especially with Mars in Libra in this new moon? Because we might be having difficulty, we might be struggling with that balance. You know, we've got Saturn and Neptune in Aries where we want to throw ourselves completely into it. And this movie, this Jeff Buckley documentary, highly recommend it. If you can go see it, it's playing at like little art theaters around the country for maybe the next week or two. I think that an artist like Jeff Buckley was trying to pursue that excellence to the point where it kind of drove him mad. He became a victim of his own perfectionism. He went off and created this incredible debut album called Grace. If you haven't heard it, please check it out. But it was so perfect, you know, that the expectations of what came after were what ultimately destroyed him. And the pressure from a record label, I think, to produce another Grace, to produce more songs like his first one that he had 27 years or so to live into that first album. And then, trying to make something right after that within a year or so, it's very difficult as an artist sometimes. Sometimes we need the experience. We need to refill the well. So how do we pursue that balance? How do we pursue being over utilitarian production? It's a tough balance. So I'm checking in here on the chat. Let's see, we've got some really nice comments here. Okay, check in with this here and see what we've got. Javier says, funny, I pulled that card yesterday, the Eight of Pentacles, I'm assuming. So maybe it was time to get to work, right? Maybe it was time to accept yourself and to accept both the flaws and the benefits and the skills. Angela says, this moon is square my natal Venus at 0 degrees Sagittarius. Can squares be positive too? Let's hope the presence of Regulus will add some very positive connotations to this moon for everyone. I think squares are just something that creates, I think, some tension and some friction. And as far as whether it's experienced as positive or negative, often can be a matter of perspective. It can sometimes be the goad that helps get us moving. Think about the friction of tires and the tread on the tires meeting the road. You have to have that friction to create forward momentum. So oftentimes I think squares can get us over some inertia that we may have. If things are too easy, if they're too flowing, let's say there's no tread on those tires start to spin and you don't go anywhere. You might be spinning in a place where you've just been doing the same thing over and over and over again. As a Taurus moon, Angela, I get stuck in some ruts. I'm trying to think about new ways to change some of the things that I do. I think part of my gift is my consistency. But if you take that too far, if it's not balanced with innovation, it can get stale. So I've posted this big Post-it note on my refrigerator, or the version of it on my dry erase board. It says balance equals margin, balance equals space. And there's a whole list in this book of things that you can create balance with. One of the things that I'm working through is how do I balance head work with hand work, right? With like being able to do something with my hands, create something, with reading and being sedentary, with movement, like being indoors, with being outdoors, with being invisible, with creating more visibility. All of those things are questions that can lead to breakthroughs. And yes, I think we'll talk about Regulus in a second. Regulus is a very powerful fixed star that can, I think, lead to some positive outcomes. Javier says, yes, I understand that. Seeing others can provoke hyper over criticism. Haha, especially with my mother, who has a Virgo sun, and frequently reminds me. Yeah, there's some pretty heavy, I guess you could say, voodoo that parents have over us. And especially if parents are critical of our process, that can lead to a lot of difficulty in our adulthood where we have to kind of unpack their feelings versus our own feelings. And that's sometimes a lifelong journey, but hopefully it happens eventually, right? Anna says, I have a Virgo stellium. Just recently I started to let go of perfection. It might be part of that Virgo South Node that is helping us to learn that sometimes less is more. Sometimes surrender actually moves us closer to the goal rather than constantly working something to death. I know for me, if I'm feeling anxious about something, sometimes the best antidote to that anxiety is to get away from the problem completely, to stop chewing on it, to stop working it, right? I used to draw when I was a kid too. Maybe I'll post some of my drawings on social media pretty soon. But I used to draw so much that I used to erase so much that I would erase a hole in the paper and I would destroy the thing I was trying to perfect. So sometimes just saying this is good enough and letting it go and then taking a step away from it can help us to see things from a new perspective. Javier says, I find squares are good for change, getting out of the stagnant major learning lessons. Absolutely, that inertia, that friction that we were talking about. Ani says, squares with the moon and sun are better than square with malefics, but that's a good question. Yeah, I would agree. Malefic squares can feel subjectively more painful. Let's see. Javier says, I've also learned that recently smaller steps lead to changes that stick, like learning math out of order. You must start at the beginning, 1 + 1. A perfect example of one of the laws of incarnation that Virgo is famous for is understanding that we can't skip over some of the important learning steps and processes in our creative process. This is why I'm having a lot of trouble with things like AI recently, like beyond the environmental impact and challenge that it has out in the world. It skips over process. It takes process out of our lives, which I think is actually very, very dangerous. When you take process out of your life, you become dependent on the machine. You become like an infant once again. It is the anti-maturity type of tool. It doesn't help you to learn through overcoming things step by step. It just says, let's just focus on the results. And I think that's a very, very dangerous way to be, because when we become result focused rather than process orientated, all sorts of horrific things can happen. Okay, I've got some nice comments in the group here. Angela says, Jeff Buckley, I hope I can watch the documentary even here. Oh, Angela, they had some footage of him in Paris talking about him singing Edith Piaf. He was very popular over there in France, so I hope that you get to see it too, because a magical soul. He struggled with some mental health challenges towards the end of his life, and I think they showed a lot of light on that. But just it was so balanced with some of his beautiful expression as well. Really, really wonderful documentary. Ani says, if the new moon is aspecting your natal Venus, it might imply starting something or trigger something with relationships or women. It's not necessarily negative, hard to say with limited info. I could see that. Yeah, I think it could potentially trigger some new realizations with that. Ani says, squares are tense, but they force change. Exactly. Spencer knows better than I do. Well, I don't know. We're co-creating this together. But yes, they definitely, I think, are catalysts for change. Javier says, LOL, what if I have trouble resting and I work too much? Realizing it lends to what you are saying, living up to other forms of perfection, finally working towards my sense of perfection. I would highly recommend this margin book if you are addicted to the workahol. I think that this is something we're working on in my household, because I think both my partner and I have had tendencies to try to do too much, to work too much, but especially my partner, who feels a very intense sense of duty, which I really respect about her. It's an admirable quality, but sometimes that can lead to burnout. And the equation in this margin book is the power that you have, the skill set that you have, the energy that you have, minus the load that you are carrying, right? The responsibilities, the commitments, the emotional load, all of those things, that equals your margin. So power minus load equals margin. And margin is defined as the space that you need to be available for how the divine wants to work through you. The space to be able to hear your muse and show up for the ideas that want to work through you, so that we don't have to burn ourselves out trying to figure out all the answers ourselves. Sometimes we get inspirational moments from the muse when we create space for it. And this is something that we have not had a lot of in our lives, that we are working to restore. And it's been a real enlightening type of energy and conversation. I feel like we feel a lot healthier. We had to complete some things. When we completed our webinar series, that took some things off our plate and created some space naturally. But how do we maintain that space? How do we protect that space? How do we not just go and fill up any space that we create in our lives immediately when we get some? How do we sit with it? How do we be comfortable with it? Late stage capitalism says, well, idleness is the hands of the devil, right? Well, that's a utilitarian type of experience where it's extractive. It's the extraction of labor that we can't possibly provide for the insatiable greed of the billionaire class. So a lot of times it's the cultures that we come up through that add to this. A lot of the talk that Dr. Swenson says about in this book was his visits to different areas of the world, some of which have a much slower pace, and the space and margin that they've created because their priorities are very different. They're not constantly trying to pursue unending wealth, unending growth, etc. Their family relationships are important. The time that they spend with one another. Rest is important. There are other cultures in the world, not America, friends, that prioritize a nap in the afternoon and say, hey, it's siesta time, and that can actually lead to more productive work or better quality of work. I think we have this kind of, we've seen, I think, a lower quality of work as we've been pushed to do more. I think about the enshittification of the world and like all the AI slop that's coming out. There's no quality to it anymore. There's no depth to it. It's just, how can we make more? How can we manipulate people into buying more of our things and cram our schedules with more? Well, how do you to get to depth? You need time, you need space. And sometimes we can't force that, right? So I think that loving yourself is a start, and loving who you are now without having to be anything else, without having to do anything else, is important. Doesn't mean that we don't do anything. It means that we create balance between those two things. I know for me, if I've been resting too much now in the last week or so, I say, I've been laying around too much. I need to do something active. I need to stop reading, stop reflecting, because I'm a very reflective person. I could spend all day reflecting, reading, being inside my head. I said, I have to get in my body. I have to go and do something with my hands. I have to go and get out in my yard, get out in my garden. I need to get some light in my eyes. All of those things are a conscious action that I'm taking to restore equilibrium and balance. Yeah, appreciate you, Angela. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate you, friend. Javier says, yes, Pisces faith, we got this. Absolutely. Dependent, or you could be digesting false info. Javier says, I'm just kind of seeing all the, sometimes we're a little behind on the chat, so if it's out of context, I'll try to recontextualize for you. Angela says, oh, wow, he had a magical soul indeed, in reference to Jeff Buckley. He absolutely did. Really, really is a great, great movie, worth your time. If you're new to him, whew, get ready to have your mind blown. If he's been a favorite of yours for a long time, a lot of really cool insights in that film. Jody says, Spencer, you must read The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Ooh, I'll have to check that out. Here you go. This is my MO. If someone is suggesting a book, I have to take a picture of it. There we go. So thank you for the suggestion. And Sisyphus, of course, was the I don't know, I guess he was a titan perhaps in Greek mythology who kept rolling the ball up the hill and it kept rolling back on him. It sounds like that might be a guide towards learning that we just can't keep working indefinitely, but you tell me. I'll have to check out the book. Javiera says, sorry, I think I missed the title. My daughter is asking me questions. Margin is the book I was talking about. The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus is the one that Jody was suggesting. Javier says, yay, Nicaragua has a way different way. Exactly, right? So in Central and South America, right? Nicaragua is Central America. Slower pace, right? Different priorities, relationships maybe over profit, and some of that is, some of that is due to circumstances, but some of it is it's baked into the culture. It is something that they have protected over time, right? Protecting that time spent at the dinner table with each other, that time interacting with one another. Some of it is due to like when we release our attachment to technology, we have to be more present, right? So I think that that's something that I've been really meditating on this week. Anna says, Javier, it's been so good to let go and not criticize myself so much and accepting all the compliments I receive when I do something. Before, I didn't believe it was beautiful what I did. Yeah. Being able to hear when people are actually telling us a compliment is something that I think we can grow into, right? When we don't question that, we just receive it. That was another thing that when I was a professional musician, someone would come up to me and give me a compliment. I'm like, I was always focused on the thing I did wrong, not the thing I was doing right. And I had another musician friend that said, when someone comes up and gives you a compliment, don't say no to them, because what you're doing is you're insulting their taste, right? You just say thank you. Say thank you and accept it and move forward. That's how you're giving respect to that person. You can analyze at the end of the day and go and fix the flaws that you see. But in that moment, in that interaction with a fan or with an audience member, that reciprocity is saying, hey, I recognize that you are trying to give something to me by giving that compliment and receiving it gracefully rather than denying it. Yeah, it is hard at first to receive compliments. Okay, so back to our chart, back to our new moon. We're talking new moon in Virgo. We've talked about the sun and the moon in Virgo I. We do have the sun in its own decan in Virgo I, which gives it a little extra power. The ability to understand both our gifts and the things that we need to work on to improve. The South Node co-present with the sun and the moon talks about releasing attachment to process and sometimes surrendering and accepting things as they are rather than always having to work them and work them and work them. Releasing anxiety, getting sleep, protecting our body, dreaming a little bit. I've been really enjoying the Sandman series on Netflix, if you haven't seen it. And it's Neil Gaiman, who is, man, I'm just so disappointed that guy has fallen short of the glory with his actions, because his writing was really powerful. I do recommend his series, because there's all sorts of things about dream and the relationship with that, with death and with desire, all of these things. It's a really beautiful and well-made show. If we can look past some of the personal actions of the individual that created it, that's always a really tough challenge. Is can we separate the creator from the art that they created? There's been all sorts of problematic creators over the course of time, and I don't have a good answer to that right now. But I know that he did create some very beautiful writing within that, and one that was very progressive and showed a lot of folks that are on the fringes of society in a very positive light. So anyway, we've talked a little bit about Mercury and its host being an aversion, although it has a mutual reception. As Ani caught that detail for us, we have a mutual reception between Mercury and the Sun, a secret line of communication between the two. We also have the new moon squared Uranus. So let's bring this up to the stage again here. Show this here. We'll talk about that very briefly. Let's remove that, add this. So what we're looking at here is here's Uranus at 1 degree of Gemini squaring the new moon, or the new moon squaring it. Okay. So when we talk about the new moon squaring Uranus, I have a really, I think it was a successful live stream when I broke down Uranus in Gemini through the language of a Q&A session like we're having here today. But I was really inspired by Liz Green's book, The Art of Stealing Fire, which talks a lot about the myth of Prometheus. And one of the things that I think is important to recognize about this new moon squared Uranus is Prometheus, aka Uranus, in Gemini, is a placement that can lead us to pursuit of being God-like through the lens of Gemini, through the expansion of more details, through splitting our attention in a million different ways, through breaking things down into small digestible pieces. One of the things that's been coming up again and again and again since Uranus moved into Gemini, not only in my own life and career, but I've seen it with other content creators online, things of that nature. People who had long form content are all starting to break it into short form content, like reels, like shorts, etc. And I feel like that's Uranus and Gemini saying, hey, let's make this digestible. This is our way to break through to the other side, is to make something that people can learn from that isn't necessarily so long. Now, as somebody who wants to be thorough with things, I have a little bit of an aversion to that, because sometimes things can get taken out of context. Although I will admit that sometimes a digestible bit can lead people to the longer form content that has more context. And that is my hope. So we may be trying to pursue, excuse me, might be trying to pursue smaller bits of information to ascend to a godlike being. Now, the danger of that with Uranus and Gemini, and with Prometheus, aka Uranus in general, is the hubris of trying to become godlike, of something that can get out of our control. I've talked a lot about Michael Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park. He has Uranus and Gemini, very prominent in the chart. I believe it's in the 11th house. And Jurassic Park is a cautionary tale, not only about the scientists that are pursuing bringing something back to life that natural forces had brought to extinction, the desire to go against nature as a Uranian concept, but also, and it was pointed out to me as a really good point, is that the hubris in that story was not just the scientist. It was the capitalist that wanted to go beyond the limitations and the warnings of the scientist. So it was taking the abomination against nature and then saying, how can we profit from this, and disregard any sort of physical limitations that would come up regarding that. Now, that is difficult when we're dealing with the Decan, Virgo I, that is trying to teach us the laws of physical incarnation. When we're dealing with any types of laws, we're dealing with limits. Who's the exactor of law in astrology? Some might say Jupiter, some might say Saturn, experiencing our limitations. When we try to push beyond our natural limitations and go to a place where we're stealing fire from the gods and trying to have dominion over them on some level, over the natural process, that can lead to losing control of that fire and it going and creating destruction, right? If you try to carry a fire, a little flame in a container, but you're not respecting the need to go slow, to walk very carefully, you may trip on the way. And if there's any flammable material around you, everything goes up in flames, because you tried to run with that flame instead of taking your time and respecting the natural process and the containers for that flame. The same thing is happening right now with AI. We're seeing people pursue it, using it without thinking about any of the repercussions, limitations, etc. Does that mean that inherently artificial intelligence is an evil thing? Not necessarily, although we can make all sorts of arguments around it. But the use of it without guardrails, the use of it without limitations, the use of it without asking the questions of its environmental impact, of its impact on humanity's consciousness itself, the ability to be critical thinkers, the ability to be a creative processing being, is something that we are failing to ask when we are using this technology. And the consequences could be extraordinarily dire, not only for our ability to sustain life on this planet, but for our ability to sustain consciousness that understands creative process. So that's a danger that we have with this, that we are moving too quickly, that we are moving towards expansion, that we think we can be godlike with these expanding of new possibilities that go against the natural order and law of nature. And that's part of the tension that we may be experiencing with the new moon squaring Uranus. So I'm going to go back to the chat because we've had some people who have some thoughts on this. Let's see. I love that you are all so active in the chat today. It's such an honor to have so many people commenting on this. Let's see. I've got to go back. Jody says Sisyphus is about a king who was cursed by the gods to roll a massive boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down each time, requiring him to start again, right? And I think that's a good metaphor, not only for hubris, but also understanding that natural processes are cyclical. Anytime we feel like we're pursuing something and we're pushing this boulder up the hill, we're aspiring towards this perfection, life is going to roll that ball back down the hill. Think about it with the dishes. The dishes is the most Sisyphean task ever. You do all this effort to clean out the stack of dishes that you have, and then 2 days later you've got another stack again because you have to keep eating. It's about the process of cleaning the dishes. It's not about the one specific act of clearing out that clutter. It's about showing up day after day and doing the work, because that's what's going to help keep you in balance and equilibrium. Javier says, I do remember the story as a child. Very good recommendations. Oh, good. Jody says, it's a metaphor for the futility of trying to overcome a problem and the importance of perseverance in the face of adversity, but it's a statement about trying to reach a goal when really that's not what is important. The dialogue about the book Margin reminds me of this myth because we are all trying so hard to accomplish stuff when really that's not what's important. I agree. Amen to that. Jody says, I think the pursuit of perfectionism is dangerous and not what will ever make us happy. Okay, done with my rant, she says. I was driving before, so I had to wait to get home to comment. No, great observations. I agree. And a lot of that was, I think, infused into my discussion about the square with Uranus, too. The pursuit of divinity is often a pursuit of divine form, like Platonic form. The pursuit of perfection that we think that we can achieve through the idea of something. The idea of something can be very much more perfect in our mind than the actual manifestation of it. And if we keep chasing that without making space for satisfaction, without making space for the 10% wabi-sabi of nature's beauty of completing that, of the flaws inherent that make actually things beautiful, then we're going to be going down a very difficult path, right? This is the difficulty of something what we've seen in the news, like that's coming up about eugenics. When we're trying to use science to remove what we perceive as any flaw in our DNA, we can eliminate some of the things that make us beautiful, some of the things that create our character, that create our resiliency. It's just a really fascinating time in history, and I think that's a great book recommendation for these. Okay. All right, let's see. Ani says, I notice a lot of YouTubers breaking up their podcasts by topic and reposting them in slices. I think it's effective to lead people into content. For instance, your short grabbed my attention. Yeah, see, that's exactly the goal, right? How do we create an entry point? For many people, a 2-hour live stream, they just don't have the time or energy for it or attention span for it. You all are amazing that you are able to hang with me for this period of time, and I love you for it. But being able to give someone an entry point may lead them to the ability to sit with us for a longer period of time, to get the context behind the initial idea. So yeah, I think it is a balancing point. And that's part of my pursuit of balance, is I know that I'm very attached and pretty good at long form content. But to bring balance in, maybe learning how to make some more short form entry points would bring balance to my experience and bring new people into the fold and be able to connect with more people. I think that's the goal. Javier says, Rocky Horror Picture Show style. Oh, time warp, right? Yeah, absolutely. Jody says, I think Prometheus is about defying authority. He was being punished. Wasn't he trying to help humanity by stealing fire? Yes, he was. Um, and yes, he was also defying authority. But uh, I think that there is a lot of Virgo wisdom in the way that Liz Green, a Virgo sun, talks about the attempts of Prometheus to go against the natural order, against nature. There are a lot of examples in that book of people who had a divine ideal that thought they were helping humanity that ended up losing control of that ideal and creating massive destruction. And an example of this, two examples. The first is Oppenheimer, who had Uranus on the descendant, who thought he was creating something through splitting the atom, but it ended up being extraordinarily destructive. Just because he can do that doesn't mean that he should have. The other example was Adolf Hitler, who had Uranus on the ascendant, who thought through his very warped perspective that he was creating a better, I don't know, cleaner world in his opinion. But he created massive suffering and massive destruction. He was, and the point that Liz Green makes is that this impulse towards divinity, this impulse towards perfection, is always channeled through the character of the individual trying to wield it. And if the individual of the character trying to wield that power is flawed, is traumatized, is evil, it can't be controlled in a way that is positive. Doesn't mean that there weren't some people who have used Uranian energy for the benefit of humanity. There is, if we want to take a balanced viewpoint, there are definitely people that have brought some beautiful gifts to humanity in that way. But I think that it's not a popular opinion to see that progress isn't always a positive thing. This is one of the arguments in margin, that the progress that we tend to be attached to, and I don't mean with like equality or like with being able to have human rights. I'm talking about progress that's attached to new technologies, growing the economy, all of these things where we think we have to keep progressing like a hamster. But that Sisyphus story that you talk about says that boulder is just going to keep falling down on here. We are giving up things in the name of progress. Now, that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to turn back the clock or to some mythological golden age that never existed. He talks about that specifically. There are some things that scientific advancements have made our lives much better and much easier. But how do we balance that with understanding that some of our ancestors had more space in their lives? They weren't chronically overloaded. They weren't necessarily chronically anxious, right? They had different problems, and they're different. They're different. They're not necessarily better or worse. But I think that understanding what our problems are in this modern society is important. And a lot of the problems we have in modern society is information overload, progress overload. Greed is a problem in our modern society, where we think we have to have more and more and more wealth. And it's a problem with our leaders. It's, a lot of people here in the chat here today probably don't necessarily struggle with that, but they're forced to work within a system that does. And that is a problem. So that can lead to lapses of integrity as we are forced into doing things in a way that don't resonate with who we are just to survive, because of the people at the top of the food chain, so to speak, that are taking more than their share. Javier says, I agree, it draws others in, short form content, but I love how Spencer is so detailed. I will always appreciate and value that. I appreciate that. And I don't think I'm going to stop doing long form stuff. I think that it's just about balance, right? But thank you. I appreciate that, friend. Hopefully we're bringing back the ability to spend time with one another and go into depth. Ani says the gods didn't appreciate Prometheus. No, because they didn't want the secret of their divinity to be stolen, right? Zeus was very upset about that. He didn't want he wanted control on some level. So I think that that's another thing that Uranus can rebel against. I think the rebellion part of Uranus is interesting to me because Uranus rebels. I think that the real crux of it is when we are aspiring to a divine ideal, when we look around and we don't see that divine ideal manifesting physically, We say, we're unhappy with this. We're unsatisfied with this. This needs to change. And sometimes that can lead to great breakthroughs. Like, Angela and I were talking about this in the Uranus and Gemini, I believe. Or it was somebody from France. I think it was Angela. We were talking about the French Revolution and like how that was a huge breakthrough for human rights. But it also got taken to an extreme that led to a lot of suffering in that time as well. And you don't hear about that as much in the history books because history tends to gloss over some of the painful things in service of creating a narrative. So there were breakthroughs through things like the French Revolution, which some people could call a Uranian type of experience. But there were also things where regular citizens were being murdered, not just kings, because people didn't necessarily agree with the prevailing sentiment of the rebel. So it's all relative. Yes, intention. We have to think about how we're utilizing this energy. Sharing fire. I like that. Sharing fire is good. I like how you've turned that on its head. Jody says there are studies that show how AI will make our brains atrophy. Exactly. I think it's a really important question to start asking because we're offloading our ability to think critically. And there's an argument in margin being made that the more technology that we bring into our lives, it was supposed to make our lives easier, but somehow it has complicated our lives in a lot of ways. Just see what you think about the book. I would love to have a discussion about it with more people. It's not a perfect book. There's some things in there that are, it was written before the pandemic. It was written before the acceleration of the wealth gap that has made some of the social safety net systems start to disappear. It was written before the accelerated rise of fascist regimes within the world. And that is part of its flaw. But I do think that there's some ideas in there that are timeless that I would love to be able to discuss with people. Angela says, AI scares me. I do see the laziness of people starting to use it without processing and being critical, as you say, is terrifying, without even thinking about how it's used to manipulate people. Absolutely. We might have a difficult way of seeing what is real and what isn't into the future. And the ability to think critically is going to be very important moving forward. Jody says, I love these lives. Such great stuff learned here. Thank you, Spencer. Always a beautiful contribution to the astrological community. Thank you, Jody. Appreciate you for being here. You're such a great supporter of the channel. Javier says, I agree, Jody. It helps me so much more than you all know. Thank you all. I appreciate that, friends. Kate is here. What's up, Kate? Uranus square to Virgo new moon feels like a chemical corruption. The magician brain-eating amoeba, the last of us, plot lines, spores. I'm thinking, keep your thoughts intentional. I would say keep your thoughts in service of the natural order, the natural process. I would say don't try to push too far beyond the laws of time and space. I guess that's where the hubris comes in, because it can very easily, we can lose control of it very easily. Does that mean that we shouldn't use the friction of the square to shatter some of our old patterns and habits? No, we should do that. That can bring balance, but we have to be careful to respect the natural order of things. We have to respect the time it takes to learn a skill, the time and energy and resilience it takes to fail every once in a while and learn how to overcome failure. If we don't learn to overcome failure, we're not going to be resilient when all of the tools that we're using cease to work, or when all of those tools, and this is important, when all of those tools start to become monetized to the point where they become gatekept by people who want to profit off of those tools. Oftentimes these new technologies come in the form of the radio, the television, the computer, the internet. All these things were very free and open when they first started, like AI is at this point. And then people come in and they say, we need to gatekeep this. We need to profit off of this. And they make that tool less accessible to people to use, and they are already dependent on it. So by you becoming dependent on things like AI, then you've already lost your freedom to it. So it doesn't mean that there won't be applications where it can be useful, but we have to learn not to become a slave to it. Ani says, with great power comes great responsibility, and Prometheus gave a bunch, and is children lighters to play with. Gave a bunch of children lighters to play with, leaving a mess for the gods, and here we are. Totally. check out The Art of Stealing Fire. Really great reflections in this book. I'm not even doing it half justice. I did really lay it out quite systematically in the Uranus and Gemini Q&A. I think there's a lot of value in that is more evergreen than maybe even some of the other things that we do here. So I would highly recommend checking out that video too. Kate says, imagine if Prometheus hadn't been consumed by his thoughts and goals. Yeah, imagine if his liver hadn't been consumed every day, which is a representation of his hope, right? Sometimes we have to maintain our hope and our faith in the world as well. Okay. Strings is here. It says, Strings of Apollo Astrology says, my Virgo sun feels the need to mention Zeus's response to Prometheus was also Pandora. For me, this relates to the unexpected ripple effects of sudden quantum leaps of progress. Ooh, great point. And I love the ability to contextualize all of the different parts of myth within this. And this was something else that we were really enjoying last night watching Sandman. There was a lot of reference to Greek mythology in the second season that I think a lot of you would really enjoy. But yes, the result for that hubris was the release of all of the ills of humanity that we experience: old age, death, war, pestilence, disease. That was the God's response to stealing fire, of trying to be more than we are supposed to be, I guess you could say. I don't know if that's the right wording. I know that's going to rub some people the wrong way. I think that there is a humility, though, in understanding that we can be co-creators and channels for divine wisdom without mistaking ourselves as the source of that wisdom, the source of that energy. I think source is its own thing. We are vehicles for source. When we mistake ourselves, when our ego mistakes ourselves as the source of that power, of that energy, of that wisdom, that's when we start to try to lord it over people and start to unleash that Pandora's box, or jar, I guess you could say, is actually a jar. Kate says, Virgo has me thinking of tinctures and stuff, manipulating material into effective and pure purpose. Yeah, I think that could be something. Tanya makes a lot of those with a lot of her Virgo placements. Okay, we've got so many great comments in. Let's do me a favor, friends. Let's take a little stretch. Let's take a little stretch break. We've been sitting for a little while. I want you to stretch out, stretch your legs, get a drink of water, get a snack. If you have to use the bathroom, use the bathroom. But do me a huge favor. While we're taking this stretch, please like the video. Easiest thing to create positive reciprocity and to benefit the channel. If you are new here, welcome. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you know when we're going to be going live. This is another great way to support the channel. Sign up for the newsletter. There's a sale on my webinars. Purchasing those webinars, if you have some extra change in the couch cushion, great way to learn and also keep my lights on. Support Third Coast Mojo by purchasing her stuff. Like, you're keeping the lights on here. If you want to make a donation, a material donation, you could do that too. Always appreciated. But tell your friends about this. Say, hey, there's some good things going on over at on YouTube, Spencer Michaud Astrology. It's a welcoming space. Let's work through this together. Word of mouth is super powerful for these types of things, and sharing on your socials. So thank you for the stretch break and for all of the support. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Regulus. And I'm going to go through some comments. I might not be able to get to all the comments. If I don't get every single comment on the screen, I apologize. But in the interest of time, and I'm going to kind of look through them a little bit here. Let's see. I think I lost my place. Let's see. We've had some really nice conversations in here, and some really, I think, some wisdom. A lot of wisdom here. This is why I love co-creating with all of you, because you will bring my attention to things that we can't possibly always catch every detail. As thorough as I try to be, through our different perspectives, I think that we can really have a much richer tapestry, right? Sometimes you might realize something through your own lived experience that I might not through my lived experience, and that's how we co-create together. Oh, Kate, sorry about your surgery being canceled. I know we were trying to elect that, but hopefully there will be a new date that will be safer for you. Okay. Yeah, Tom says they pecked out his liver, right? Like Zeus punished Prometheus by eliminating the organ of hope, right? Which is what is the liver associated with Jupiter and with hope. So they gave him no hope, but eventually he was liberated by some say Hercules, some say Chiron. It's interesting. There's different versions of the tale. Kate says a cautionary tale about the dangers of curiosity and unintended consequences tampering with the unknown. I agree 100%. Angela says the issue is that at one point the rebel can turn into the villain. Yes, to a certain degree. Violence is inevitable in this world, I'm afraid. I mean, violence is part of the balance to peace, I think, sometimes. And I'm not exactly sure, as a peace-loving person, that's been a hard reality for me to accept. I know that I've sometimes tried to sweep violence under the rug, and it's a mistake to do that. The example that comes to mind is our food systems. You know, understanding the sacrifice and violence that comes with eating an animal, for example, or even eating a plant, which a lot of people have consciousness. I think when we differentiate between animal consciousness and plant consciousness, they're both conscious in their own way. I really liked a book. It was called I'm not going to remember the title, but it is something about the enlightened carnivore or something like that. It's a book that talked about hunting and things of that nature. I know that now everybody's going to have a different take on that here, but respecting the violence that went into the sacrifice of that animal is really important, and it gives you reverence for that which you are consuming. This is why we're moving away, hopefully, even if you're a meat eater, moving away from factory farming, industrialized farming, because that's a way to create suffering within those animals. And if we can be better stewards and understand and respect the violence. I really like Anthony Bourdain when he goes to some different countries and participates in the slaughter of the particular animal. He had almost a religious experience when he did this, and I don't remember exactly what country it was, but he had a newfound respect for that animal, for the food that he was eating. It wasn't just something in a package that he picked up off the shelf. And maybe that leads us to have that more reverence, that more respect, maybe even limiting our consumption of things, or having balance in that consumption. Ani says, this is a good reminder to purposely make space for the divine and receive insight and direct my attention more wisely. Being busy is being distracted and scattered, which accomplishes little. Ani, from God's ears to your mouth, or God's mouth to your mouth, whatever it is. But I think that that's very true. And that's one of the other points of this book, Margin, is how do we create space to be guided by the divine, guided by spirit, guided by the muse, to give a little bit of our time to where we need to be guided into service, right? And I think that that's super important. If we fill all of our space with just noise all the time, those of you who have 24-hour news channels on, turn that shit off. That is the worst type of distraction, because what it does is it's designed to make you anxious, distracted, etc. Sit in silence every once in a while. Turn that phone off. You know, I appreciate that you coming and spending time with me this afternoon, but balance that out sometime this week with silence, with not necessarily needing to consume something. Face your own thoughts, face your own inner voice. You know, learn something in that space. Let yourself be guided. Create space for that. Our lives are so overloaded. Yes. Let's see. Yes. Absolutely. To some, liberation is oppression. It's all a matter of perspective and what side of things that you're on, and it's a really difficult balancing act. You know, victory for someone can be a loss to another, and it's part of the great cycle. Ani says, if I'm going to play with fire, I should probably pay attention. Thanks, Prometheus. Sorry for the typos. No worries. Okay. Kate says, as a student of the stars, I do believe we're given grace of knowledge for a reason. I agree. Foresight can help us make better decisions in the moment. As a an astrologer. I made the prediction of the Mercury and Malefic enclosure that certain things would happen this weekend, and that was in July. And that foresight helped me in the moment to make a better decision. Because I was understanding that Mercury was going to be a malefic enclosure of the weekend, I had a difficult conversation and a reconciliation with somebody before Mercury went into its malefic enclosure, because I know that the circumstances might have been more difficult to do so. And in that case, my preparation helped me to create a better outcome with the knowledge of astrology. And it wasn't anything serious. It was just a little thing that I needed to clear up. String says, yes, and hope was the only thing that didn't leave Pandora's jar, right? It's in the lip. Like, that's what helps us deal with some of these challenging things, is having that hope. Dealing with it, cleansing our livers if we need to do. That might be something. If we're feeling hopeless, how do we cleanse our livers? Do a liver cleanse within reason, right? Might be a good way to bring some of those good feelings back. Angela says, I don't eat animals, but I don't judge others who do. There is someone like me who can be very intense and judgmental about this. Yeah. No, Angela, I totally get it. Like, I was vegan for a period of time, and I know I'm outing myself on a controversial topic that is people have strong feelings about. But I was the judgmental vegan for a long time. And I just went through a little bit of a different shift of consciousness, especially with the idea that I think there's hierarchical thinking when we talk about the consciousness of one animal versus a plant. And that idea really shifted things in me. First of all, I was the most judgmental person to be around as a young vegetarian, vegan, and people didn't like being around me. And I had to learn that there are many different ways to live, and that sometimes mercy and acceptance of other people's choices is important. And I think that there are lots of different ways to live. And just because I'm no longer vegan or vegetarian doesn't mean that I don't believe in justice and proper treatment of animals, and creating better conditions for their lives. And it's a tough question to answer, but yeah, I think that anytime that we release our judgmental nature, I think is a gift to people. Doesn't mean we can't call out imbalances when we see them. And there are definitely plenty of imbalances in our food systems that are, I think, ready for shifting and ready for changing. Ani says, I didn't realize that liver associated with hope, which is Jupiter's realm. That makes sense. Drinking burdock and dandelion tea. Already feel better. There you go. I love it. I love that you're putting it into action, friend. Javier says, it is. I'm intrigued due to generational cycles and alcohol abuse. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, alcohol has an effect on the liver. It can be a depressant. It can make us lose hope sometimes. Like, this is, I fortunately have not fallen prey to the challenges of alcoholism. I'm grateful for that. I had an experience when I was in high school where I drank way too much at a party, 17 years old, ended up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning, and I almost died. So I'm very, very careful about that type of thing moving forward. And I've seen it destroy a lot of lives and destroy hope around. So I know people struggle with it, though, and it's not a judgment on their process. I think it's just more that I'm grateful for my experience that helped, I think, save my life on some level moving forward. So we all go through these different processes, and we all have some crosses to bear, and we're working through all different challenges. But yeah, doing a liver cleanse I think can be great to bring some hope back into your life and to release some of that, maybe some of that depression, etc. But I'm not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. So work with your medical practitioners, your shaman, whatever it is that you're working with, to make sure that you're doing so safely. Javier says, interesting how alcohol abuse in certain countries can be related to lack of hope mentality, repressed communities. Exactly. Absolutely. Thank you, Angela. Oh, thank you, Anna, for your contribution today. Appreciate you. Thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate you being here, and thank you for your donation today. Steven says, just arrived, Virgo I, 7 of Cups. Well, Virgo I is actually the 8 of Pentacles, but 7 of Cups is, what is 7 of Cups? 7 of Cups is Scorpio 3. So maybe there's a different association you have with that, but welcome, Stephen. Thanks for stopping in today. Kate says, I have two Aries siblings who recently become sober from alcohol and narcotics. Oh, that's good. After 20 years of addiction. Oh, that's a great victory. And I hope that your relationship with them is solid and positive, and it's wonderful to see a success story with that. And it's a process. It's a process to continue going through and choosing sobriety each day. Oops, wrong card. Stephen says, yeah, no worries. It's all good. Javier says, could definitely lend problems here in Canada, keeping people at a low vibe. I agree. It can be a real problem. I think moderation and balance and things is important. Let's see. KWOW is here. It says, hey, Spencer, what orb of engagement is usually used with fixed stars? That's a good question. I would say it depends on the magnitude of the fixed star. Really bright fixed stars have a little bit of a wider orb. I would say that a lot of traditional astrologers use an orb of about 1 to 2 degrees, and that's a great way of that is a great segue to talking about Regulus, because here we have thank you for bringing us back on track in a gentle way. We have Regulus, the new moon conjoining Regulus. Here you can see it on the big screen. If you want to pause and take a look at the chart, I can give you that moment. But then let's take a look at this fixed star and let's talk about it. And I'm going to go back to the smaller screen. There you go. There's our fixed star Regulus at about 0 degrees. Now Regulus is one of the royal fixed stars of Persia. It is the heart of the lion, which is interesting. Like the lion, we're talking about Virgo here, Spencer. Well, due to a concept known as precession, the fixed stars, quote unquote, are actually moving against a changeable zodiac from our perspective here on Earth. The zodiac is moving due to the wobble of the axes of the Earth over time. And so now the fixed star Regulus, which used to be in the late stages of Leo, which at one point was probably in the middle stages of Leo, right, is now in the very early degrees of Virgo. So a royal fixed star of Persia, an ancient summer solstice marker. It is a fixed star that has been associated with granting success and power. Bernadette Brady, in her wonderful books, talks about the nemesis to avoid, like a challenge to avoid, is revenge to maintain power. It has a quality of being able to have a commanding nature, but with high expectations. It also brings us an awareness of power ethics. A lot of times, Regulus can lead to a strong desire for power, a desire to take up leadership positions. But at what cost? Are we keeping our ethics around that? If we pursue power and we at the cost of our ethics and at the cost of our integrity, well, that can lead to some really evil manifestations. And we've seen plenty of that recently in the collective, especially with some of our leaders that have placements on Regulus. Now, one thing I think it's interesting about having this new moon on Regulus in Virgo, we've talked about people that have become empowered. There's been a lot of people who own technological companies that have become the new power brokers, the quote unquote tech bros that we're talking about. It's fascinating how that's shifted over. And instead of kings, now we have CEOs of tech companies. It's really fascinating and horrifying all in the same moment. But this is a really powerful new moon from the Regulus perspective, because we are dealing with a fixed star that could be very empowering. Again, I'm going to be hopefully the voice of reason in the room, that because of the square of Uranus, we have to be very careful when situations empower us, that we're not moving beyond reasonable limits, that we're not starting a process that can become uncontrollable, that can lead to destruction. Now, how do you do that? Well, you take your time, you pace yourself, you ask questions. Is this really an opportunity that's going to bring balance into my life? Or is it going to bring disharmony into my life? Is it going to bring an extreme of anything into my life? Because anything at its extreme will start to manifest and morph into its opposite. This is a lesson I've learned from some of the Taoist wisdom that I enjoy studying at various times. So something that eventually was something that was very good in the beginning can eventually become toxic. Think about just a piece of cake that tastes really good, and you're like, oh, if you have a little, or ice cream. This has been my little thing lately. Sometimes Tanya will bring some ice cream home from the farmer's market, and if you have one spoonful of ice cream or two spoonfuls, that can be really great, and you can feel really good about it, and you don't have to worry about the consequences. But if you eat the whole pint of ice cream, it can eventually make you sick. It can eventually lead to challenges within your body. So that which brought us pleasure and joy eventually can bring us pain and suffering. So this is the wisdom, I think, of Regulus here is we may be offered opportunities for empowerment. We may be offered opportunities for expansion in ways that we don't completely understand. And we need to ask the hard questions and try to see and understand what could be potentially collateral damage of doing so. Does that mean that we say no to all the new opportunities? Not necessarily. But we do have to trust our gut. We do have to trust our intuition. We have to trust Hermes as our psychopomp that is leading and guiding souls to the underworld, leading us to our own inner awareness. We have to trust the voice of the oracle, famous in the new moon decan of Virgo I, that talks about being able to hear the voice of the divine. If you're getting a red flag about something in a position of power, trust that and say, I need to slow down. It's okay to say no. We have lost the ability to say no in our current society. Sometimes we say, oh, we have to say yes to everything. Some of the most powerful people in the world are the ones that know the value of saying no. Doesn't mean we have to say no to everything, but it means that we have to be able to protect the types of things that we value. Now, when you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else. If you're saying no to excess, you're saying yes to peace. If you're saying no to positions of power that will take you away from your relationships, that will take you away from your peace of mind and produce anxiety, you are saying yes to peace of mind. You are saying yes to your partner, to your family, etc. If you think about it in those terms, it's much easier to say no, because the no is a protective no rather than one that takes away from you. It's actually empowering you in a lot of ways. So the creative no, the balanced no, I think is important when we're talking about Regulus here. All right, I've got some more comments coming in. My goodness, you all are on a tear today. I love it. Yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff for Kate here with siblings that yeah, two siblings that are on their sobriety journey. Super amazing to see that. Love it. Okay, let's see. Javier says, I think Uranus in my 12th Capricorn helps me to move slow. I don't know, it just feels that way. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that could help us to slow down, right, in our chart. 12th house placements can slow you down. I can tell you from experience. Ani says, alcohol dulls the psyche and disconnects from subtler reality. Might be a time and place to indulge, but numbing the life creates generations of apathy and health problems, and here we are. I can't argue with that. Kate says, seems catalytic for this new moon to culmination with eclipse. Yeah, we'll talk about how it might unfold with the full moon lunar eclipse that comes within this cycle. Ani says, malefic enclosure is antagonizing this conversation, but the benefics are keeping the peace. I'm glad to hear that. Let's see. Okay, so let's keep going. So we've got the Regulus part, I hope. The first aspect that we're going to experience within this chart, and then let's take a look at how the moon is going to be moving when it separates by 15 degrees. So the outer chart that you see here is the moon escaping from the bond. The inner chart, we're going to keep the new moon, so you can see how this is going to unfold over time. So the first aspect that we have with this is a 16-degree Virgo moon, separation of a 15-degree orb, and it's going to sextile Jupiter in Cancer. That's a really positive, I think, experience. Anytime we have a positive aspect with a positive benefic planet, the unfolding could be, I think, subjectively feel very good and life affirming. Now, second decan of Virgo talks about enclosing ideas, divine spirit, divine fire, if you could think of it that way, into matter. And the process that goes into doing that, the hard, dirty work that goes into creating something beautiful, like the smith Hephaestus. This was talked about in 36 Faces by Austin Coppock. There's a lot of hard, dirty work behind the scenes that isn't visible to create some of the most beautiful tools and adornments of the gods. So we may be doing a lot of hard work behind the scenes. We may be engaging with our communities to do so as well, with the sextile with Jupiter in Cancer too. Like, this is where we meet up with friends and put our heads together and celebrate a job well done. So there might be part of that as well. Now, as we see this unfold, the sun is going to square Uranus on the 24th. So let's take a look. We've talked about that, I think, in general, but this is when that aspect is going to perfect on the 24th. I think we've covered that pretty much in depth, but know that just slightly after the new moon, the sun is going to be creating that, perfecting that aspect. We're going to feel it leading up. The 3 degrees leading up to it is a kind of an application point in traditional astrology. But this is where it peaks and then starts to fade after that. So just be careful of divine hubris, of trying to be godlike and to go against the natural order of nature. And what I mean by that is not respecting the limits of time and space, not respecting process, trying to dominate nature, which a lot of our technology is trying to do. Like, let's try to move past the need to have patience. Let's try to move past the need to understand process to create convenience. That is going against the natural order of things, in my opinion. Now, there are some things that are helpful with that, like creating healing processes, like breakthroughs in medicine and things of that nature. But sometimes it takes time to bring those things into the world. Okay, let's see. So as we continue to unfold, we have Venus moving into Leo and Mercury exiting its retrograde shadow. So here is Mercury exiting its shadow at 15 degrees, and we have Venus now moving into Leo. So let's move this forward so you can see Venus in Leo. And I did a larger breakdown of these transits in my Astrology of August, so I would highly recommend checking that out. But as we're talking about this lunation cycle, Venus is going to be moving into the domicile of the sun. So the challenge with that is that there isn't a secret line of communication, as far as I know, unless I'm missing some kind of antitia or something. I don't think I am, though, between Venus and the sun here. So this is, I think, a true aversion between the two, where we did have a line of communication generally with the moon and Venus, depending on where the moon was. So we may be starting to become more attracted to the spotlight, to being more visible, but the resources of Virgo aren't necessarily providing for Venus in that case. I think that we may be more focused on learning new skills, more focused on making something rather than showing it to the world with this Venus and Leo cycle. But I do think that we can start working on something that is more in alignment with our integrity. I think that with Venus in Leo and then Mercury exiting its shadow, the hard work that we've done to try to become more integrated with our inner and outer selves, I think is going to be part of the Virgo mission moving through this cycle this year. So how can we make something that's really reflective of who and what we are and what we really believe, instead of just going through the motions, instead of trying to be something that someone else wants us to be? How can we be a true reflection of ourselves? All right. Let's see. Just checking in. Yeah, Ani says it's not Antisha, it's aversion. Look for solstice and equinox lines. That's what I thought. Uh, okay. So moving forward, from the 25th to the 26th, we just have a couple like benefic aspects that are going to be perfecting over the course of those days. Here's what I will say about the 25th to the 26th. It's going to be building to an opposition with Pluto. The Venus is going to be building to an opposition with Pluto. But before it does that, we are going to be experiencing a sextile with Uranus, a trine with Neptune, and a trine with Saturn. So a lot of these questions that we're asking about our visibility, we're going to be having support from the other planets for a few days, but it may also be building towards a confrontation with feeling nervous and maybe scared of our visibility, of the danger of visibility with Pluto in Aquarius. We've gone through this already with Mercury opposite Pluto. We've gone through it with the Sun opposite Pluto. Some of the themes are similar, but Venus often talks about what we're attracted to, how we attract others. Has been associated with what we value, who we value, and our values. So we may be dealing with a relationship aspect. We may be dealing with how we show up in our relationships versus how we remain invisible. We might be dealing with some corruption within our society where we need to speak up for the people on the fringe that are cast into exile. We have to use our spotlight and our voice in service of the collective with the opposition with Pluto. Some of that may feel scary. Speaking up for others and the rights of others in conditions of authoritarianism can feel threatening sometimes, but I think there are situations where we might need to do so anyway. So the benefic aspects are the few days before, and then we have the Venus opposite Pluto retrograde on the 27th. Now that is going to help us build to the first quarter moon, and this is happening at about 8 degrees of Sagittarius. So here is the 31st, and we have a square between the sun and the moon at 8 degrees of Virgo and 8 degrees of Sagittarius. So I'll circle that for you. So there's the sun, there's the moon, and we have a square between the two. Now, when we're dealing with a square between Virgo and Sagittarius, often the challenge is one of minutia versus long-range vision, of separating things out into categories and trying to bring things together to reach the goal. So you might be working on a process, you might be getting very fixated on the small details of a process, but this square with the first quarter moon in Sagittarius is going to say, how is this fitting into the bigger picture? Are we still heading towards the goal, or are we getting sidetracked and distracted by the details? Remember when I was telling you about erasing a hole in the page when I was doing art? Well, another thing that I did when I was an artist, having a Virgo stellium, was I'd like to draw faces when I was younger. And when I was learning to draw faces, I would often start with just the eye. I thought the eyes were very fascinating. But I would draw an eye without contextualizing or roughing out the rest of the face. I had to learn that was part of the important process, that I had to draw the circle of the head. I had to draw the line that connected the two eyes and the nose, etc. But I would spend an hour and a half on the eye, and then either I didn't have time to do the rest of the face, or it just didn't fit with the rest of the face. So how do we get out of our fixation with the tiny details and come up for air to see where we're going? We may also need to try to gain someone else's enthusiasm. The first decan of Sagittarius talks about enthusiasm that catches on with other people, moving with great pace and speed. I don't know necessarily if Virgo is known for being fast at what it does, although Mercury is known as being a fairly fast planet. This decan of Sagittarius is ruled by Mercury. So there is this speed. Maybe there's something that we have to do quicker than we want, and we may not be able to do it as meticulously as we want because there is a due date with it. Remember, this is part of the opportunity to release that striving for perfection and say, you know what, this is enough. This is enough today. Let's see how it fits in within the whole. As we get to the 1st of September, that's when we have Saturn stationing retrograde back into Pisces. So you can see here, Saturn moving into Pisces. There it is, into Pisces on September 1st. And this is interesting to me for a number of reasons, not least of which is if you're a magical practitioner out there and you've been waiting to do a Jupiter election, I guess there was one opportunity to do Jupiter at its maximum degree of exaltation around 14, 15 degrees, but Saturn was in a square, an overcoming square with Jupiter. And that's sort of a magical no-no, is having a malefic planet squaring your target planet. There might be ways around that if you're a talented mage, I guess, but here we have the opportunity to do Jupiter elections without Saturn interfering. So there is a window between September 1st and November 11th where Jupiter is going to be direct. Jupiter stations retrograde on November 11th, and then I think goes direct again February? I'd have to look at that, but what does it mean, though? Well, Saturn is actually improving its dignity by moving into Pisces. Even though it's retrograde, it's not in its fall anymore. So we might get some relief from some of this blatant wealth and power grab and this colonial expansion energy that we see in the first decan of Aries. We might get some relief from the negative creation of laws that only take into account one individual's desires versus the desires and needs of the collective. It's going to make us have to review how we have hope in the world, right? We've talked about hope. The third decan of Pisces has a spirit in it called Elpis, which is the translation of hope that remains under the lid of Pandora's jar. That decan is often known for wild swings of emotions, and Saturn might help us to contain our emotions and sort of understand how we can maintain hope even in the face of really challenging circumstances. I don't think all of the authoritarian, like power, wealth, land grabs are going to go away during Saturn retrograde, but it might help us to understand how we can maintain our hope to overcome those forces into the future so that we don't fall victim to them forever, because I think that there will be a pushback with all of this. The other thing to consider as we move into September is that Pluto is going out of balance in its southern declination, which we've had a lot of discussions with, not only with my Decan Walk group, but within this channel about that representing the empowerment of the people. Once again, it's the rebellion and revolutions that empower the people, whereas Pluto going out of bounds in its northern declination often represents the rise of tyrants. So interesting times. We'll talk about that more as we go further, but I think this is going to be a unique opportunity. We also have Mercury moving into Virgo on the 2nd of September. So there is Mercury heading into Virgo. This is kind of fun because this is going to be Mercury really starting to empower the sun. So we've been trying to go through different processes, understand how it fits in with our authentic expression. And now when Mercury moves into Virgo, we may really start to accelerate our learning process. We may have the skills necessary to create and to bring something into matter. It is going to be still co-present with the South Node, so don't force the process. Don't get overly attached to the details. Try to connect with essence. But I do think that mercurial matters are going to really be powerful with Mercury in both its exaltation and its domicile of Virgo. That also will lead us to a series of days where Mercury is going to be squaring Uranus, and Mars is going to be squaring Jupiter. So between the 3rd and the 4th, here we have Mercury making the square to Uranus. Try not to do too much, too many thoughts. And then we have Mars here starting to square Jupiter. And let's talk a little bit about that more. I think we've talked about the square with Uranus. It just has a different flavor with Mercury. It may have a different effect in a different area of our chart, especially the Virgo and the Gemini area of our chart as its ruler. Might be more about communications that could be Uranian influenced, communication, commerce, trying to go beyond our limits within exchanges could be difficult. But Mars square Jupiter, we have Mars in the decan of contracts and oaths in Libra 2. So Mars is something that severs and separates. So we may have a severing of a contract. We may have difficulty getting agreement. May have difficulty getting win-win situations. And it is making a square to Jupiter in the second decan of Cancer, which is associated with the walled garden, with safe spaces, with meeting up with people that we enjoy talking with. We may have some tension within our groups, our safe spaces. The good news about that square is that Jupiter is in the overcoming position. So Jupiter may be trying to soften the challenges of Mars in Libra too. So that is something to consider, is that could be a softening influence potentially. But that could be a little bit of a sticky couple days, the 3rd through the 4th. And then that is leading to our full moon lunar eclipse on September the 7th at 15 degrees of Pisces. So this is a really big one that we'll do an entire live stream about. But we have the sun in Pisces, the sun in Virgo too, talking about enclosing matter or enclosing spirit into matter and the process that goes into it, the dirty work that goes into it, the attention to detail. And then the moon in Pisces too, which really talks about the sorcerer's apprentice energy, where we may be trying to do too much before we're ready. Sometimes we have to surrender to the process and surrender to the divine will. So we're going to be balancing, I think, this wanting to work on something and work on a craft of some sort, and then the idea of contentment and acceptance around this eclipse is going to be very powerful. But we will break it down in much greater detail in the weeks ahead. Okay, I think that's what I've got for you for the astrology part here. Let's take this off the screen for a minute. And whoops. I'm going to go back to the chat. I know we've got a lot of good chats coming in. Oh, let's see here. Let me see. Oh man, we got a lot of things. I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover everything here, but let's see. I'm just reading through the chat real quick. Wow, there's a lot great conversations here today. We've got people that are so prepared for Saturn to move out of Aries. I love that. Let's see. Saturn into Pisces sucks, somebody says. Well, just depends on your perspective. As a Virgo stellium, there will be some problems that I'll have to probably revisit with it opposing my Mars again. I'm not looking forward to that, but everything's got to be somewhere. Ani says, sweet relief, getting Saturn off my ascendant ruler, Jupiter elections, you don't say, right? So it's all a matter of perspective, right? A benefit for one can be a challenge for another. And we all go through those periods of challenge and benefit. Let's see. Javier says, because when it was in Pisces, before my life seemed under a thin veil. Well, now you've learned those lessons, right? Now you've learned the lessons and you can revisit it from a place of strength, I hope. Angela says, do you think the time of Saturn in Pisces will color the eclipse in Pisces differently compared to last September when Jupiter was not exalted? Yeah, yes, 100%. I mean, think of that. Jupiter in its exile, right? The trying to do too many things, splitting our attention in 1,000 different ways. And now the eclipse moon is going to be hosted by the planet at its best position rather than its most challenged. So absolutely. And we will break that down in greater depth and detail in a future live stream. But absolutely, 100% yes. I think it will bring better manifestations than the last one with Jupiter in its exile. Oh, Kate says, I want Mercury exalted for oral surgery, but no eclipse. Yeah, everything's got to be somewhere, right? I would pay attention to Mars potentially for surgery as the condition of the surgeon. Okay. Angela says, I believe Saturn in Pisces is happier than in Aries, so that is good for you. It's relative, but yes, by essential dignity, it does improve by just not being at its worst position or at the bottom of the wheel of fortune, I could say, in its fall in Aries. So it does. This is the other thing. Not only is it moving out of its fall and out of a malefic place, it's moving into a house of a benefic that is exalted right now. So that is good news. I think it's good news all around. Yeah. Beginning of September looks electrifying, Javier says. I agree. Javier says, you're right, Spencer. We have learned tremendously, and we get to take that wisdom with us. So, yeah, all sorts of great realizations here, friends. You guys are going to be so well prepared for these transits, and it comes through our collective putting our heads together and shining our light and sharing our light with one another. Okay, friends, I do have a hexagram for you, and the hexagram I have for you is number 32. What is the essence of the new moon in Virgo I? Well, it's hexagram number 32, which translates to endurance, enduring, constancy, long-lasting, duration. This is fascinating because what you might normally think of endurance is paradoxical in the I-Ching. They talk about enduring through change. Things that endure change. Jack Balkin says, in the Western tradition, things endure because they are unchanging. The Book of Changes takes a different view. Things endure not because they do not change, but because they do change. They grow, they evolve, they respond, and in this way, they continue. The symbol of the eternal is not the unchanging, but the cycle, which is a process of constant movement and alteration governed by the principles of order, Virgo, right? Order, the principles of nature, the principles of a cycle. In a cycle, every beginning results from a previous ending, and every end point is followed by a new beginning. That's what closing time taught us in the 90s as well, right? Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginnings. And that's not my best singing for the day, but you get the idea. What endures are not the momentary manifestations of physical reality, but the basic principles that shape change and give it order and continuity. Analogous principles that apply to the world of humanity. Change is inevitable. The secret to endurance is to make the changes in one's life intelligible through principles that endure. It is to learn to grow continuously with integrity. When I get this hexagram, I always think about artists that endured the test of time. And one of the artists that always comes to mind as having longevity in his career was David Bowie. And David Bowie changed with the times. He was inspired by the music of the time that he was creating within. He didn't get stuck in one creative persona. He kept changing, he kept adapting. And that gave him the longevity of Kronos on some level, right? Because he's a Capricorn sun. So this is really interesting to see that we endure through adapting, through changing, through understanding that we don't want to get fixed at one place. We have to flow with the cycles of our life. And that requires us to be fluid. That requires us to be adaptable. And these are the lessons that we can learn from Virgo. Thank you so much, KWOW, for the super chat. Appreciate you, friend. Thank you so much. Javier says, oh, yes, we've learned tremendously. Javier says, thanks for being such a wonderful host, as always. Thank you, friend. Appreciate you. Okay, we got one more symbol for you, and then we'll be off on our journey. I have an animal for you. And look at this beautiful little I think it's like looks like a little bit like a Quaker parrot, but I think it's a green parrot of some sort with a little white, no, it's not a white face, it's a yellow face there. Look at him, little curious little parrot. I love the parrot. So the parrot is a wonderful animal for curiosity, for communication. I'm going to read you a little excerpt from Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez, a well-loved copy. It says, parrot symbolizes alertness, mimicry, communication, and prophecy. Parrot is a very social bird that communicates through very loud screeches and squawks. Only a parrot kept as a pet can mimic. This bird in the wild doesn't do that. Parrot also doesn't have vocal cords, so it is mimicking by blowing air out of its trachea. Parrots are zygodactyls, which means that their first and fourth toes point backwards and second and third point forwards. This helps them grasp and climb. This means that sometimes you have to move in two directions or to take a step backwards as you're moving forward. Stay original and unique instead of mimicking others. Otherwise, you might come across as full of hot air. When parrot appears, it means to take center stage and stand out in the crowd. Now is your time to shine in everything that you do. It also means that someone needs your help and understanding. You may be asked to be a mediator between people having a disagreement. Your inner light shines brightly, and your personality sparkles, and your smile is infectious. This bird can help you when you need an immediate witty response. Have you ever left a conversation and thought, I should have said that? Parrot will give you the power, will give those power words when you need them. If you need to add more color to your life, your home, or to yourself, Parrot can guide you to choose colors that will enhance and emphasize specific areas. So this is a great bird for communication, for being able to choose the right words, to talk about, to preen our appearances, to be more colorful, to stand out when we need to give great advice, to be a great listener, to learn how to be unique in our expression rather than just mimicking and parroting another. They are very communal animals, so like being able to connect with your communities, connect with your friends, connect whether it's online or in person. This is a great animal to help us move through those energies. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for being here today. Go check me out over at spencermichaud.com. You can follow me over on social media at Spencer Michaud on Instagram, Blue Sky, etc. Make sure you sign up for a reading, sign up for the newsletter. Please like the channel, subscribe if you can, turn on that notification bell. Really appreciate you hanging out with me. Thank you for the attention. Thank you for all of the wonderful comments. Thank you for the super chats today. Please help spread the word. Angela, thank you for your love of David Bowie. He's a wonderful soul. We've got yes, some wonderful comments coming in. Happy birthday to you, Anna. Happy early birthday on the 7th. Thank you for everyone who is contributing. It says, Bowie was never irrelevant. Good analogy, says Ani. Be the parrot and squawk. Thanks. All right. Never repress your voice. There you go. Love it. All right, friends. That's what I've got for you. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate all of you. Take this energy, work within your limits, try to understand the natural laws of things, the natural cycle of things. Connect with nature. Let nature be your teacher. Let nature be your guide. Don't force things. Create space, margin in your life through balance. Create sustaining relationships through your kindness. When you become balanced and centered internally, it's so much easier to bring that into your communities. When you release anxiety and allow yourself to be, you can bring much more positive energy into the world. Take a break from all the noise. Participate when you have the ability to do so. Pay attention so that you can be a voice to help people who are in need, especially the ones that are disempowered in these challenging times. But take some time and space to really clear your head. And I think that alone is going to help lead to much better manifestations moving forward with this new moon. So, friends, have a great week, have a great weekend, and we will see you the next time. Peace.